Oh, okay.
Across the road.
Oh, okay, okay.
Not the one that goes to the
Oh, okay, I guess I could say.
You know what?
see
I think we will wait.
So
We'll start with recommendations.
Yeah.
You know what?
I've never been to that. That's kind of.
So, back in order. Good afternoon. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. Everybody voted. I think we're on Article 12. Is there a motion? Mr. Muller. Mr. Cole.
Ron Cole, Bailey Road, 168 Bailey Road. I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to be paid for general government expenses as listed. Not as listed.
That's an asset. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, please highlight anything you'd like to highlight?
Yes, I would. There are three items that are of the greatest significance, I think. Everything's important, but there might be some differences of opinion on three items in particular. If you turn your page to the executive administrator, I'm going to say third of the way down the list, to the municipal clerk and to the assistant municipal clerk positions. I'll deal with the executive administrator first. The executive administrator, we are recommending that the position be established as a salary position, 30 hours a week, going from a rate currently, an hourly rate currently of $15.61 to a salary rate of $18 an hour. The next one is a municipal town clerk. She is currently an hourly employee. We are recommending that beside the 2% increase that we've allowed, bringing her rate from $18.73 to $19.10, that she be converted to a salary position at 30 hours a week. And the third one is the assistant municipal clerk. We are recommending that her position stay hourly, as she currently is, and that it be raised from $12.75 to $16 with a weekly hourly allotment of 30 hours per week. So those are the three most significant changes that we're putting forth.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Is there a recommendation to the Finance Committee?
Mr. Moderator, while generally supportive of this article for town government expenses, the Finance Committee unanimously offers an amendment to the article that we would like to be considered. And I'm prepared to offer that amendment if you're ready for it.
Please do.
In place of the $28,080 shown for the executive administrator, insert $26,216. And in place of the $24,960 shown for the assistant municipal clerk, insert $24,960. Make I'm sorry. Insert the amount of $22,425. And I'll now speak to the rationale for it.
Would you like to amend the total?
Yes, the total should be revised accordingly. Now I'm worried about my math. I have $283,648. I want to make sure that's correct before
confirm you had some tenants and I heard while you were explaining your rationale for the problem.
My apologies for the confusion.
Oh, I'm sorry, was there a second here?
Yes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We agreed to this idea of increasing the hours for these selected staff members. But we are concerned about the amount of increases being proposed. And it's not that we are focusing on any individuals here. That is not the issue. And we are not concerned about what we understand to be the attempt here to develop better equity among various compensated positions. But we are concerned that these particular increases for the executive administrator and for the assistant municipal clerk are disproportionately large, given that most of our other employees are receiving 2% increase throughout this budget. In the case of the executive administrator's position, that increase that was cited by Mr. Kohler is a 15% increase. In the case of, that's the wage rate, and in the case of the assistant municipal clerk's position, it represents a 25% increase in the hourly rate. And we feel that those are major administrative costs that are being added to the budget that are perhaps unnecessary. We, again, support this idea of attempting to redress perceived issues of inequity. But we believe that this should be undertaken in somewhat smaller, more prudent steps. And we have, through our analysis, thought that the better approach would be to recommend that only half of these proposed increases be awarded at this time. And that does not preclude further adjusting these in the future. And so what we are proposing with our numbers amounts to an 8% increase of the hourly rate for the executive administrator and a 13% increase for the assistant municipal clerk. Moreover, we would suggest that we, the Finance Committee, or some suitable body within the town, undertake a more comprehensive analysis of our whole wage structure across all employees for the town to ensure that we're doing a better job of achieving equity and reasonable proportionality among these different salary or wage positions.
Thank you. Discussion. Mr. DeHert.
I would just like to know what type of assessment was done to, for instance, track hours, determine how hours were utilized on what projects, to then come to a conclusion that more hours were needed or that an increase in pay was required.
Thank you. Would you like to address that? Yeah, Mr. Kohler.
Warren Kohler. From an assessment of hours, it was based on a number of different factors. The employees have been putting down standard 25-hour, currently they're allowed to work 25 hours a week. It was revealed to us that 25 hours a week were not adequate to perform the job function. This was in, I'm guessing, November when it came to our attention. And the demand for their hours fluctuates over the year based on budget season and different things like that. So there was a period of about 3 select board meetings that I recall that we discussed this with the individuals and got a sense from them as to what it was. As far as a comparative analysis, I don't remember if that's part of your question. FERCOG has done Franklin County Regional Government has done a survey on different positions. It's really difficult without having their position descriptions beside them to understand them, but from my opinion anyways, these positions were, and these raises were equitable. So I'll say that for myself.
Mary made that really clear. This is not a performance evaluation of anybody would be inappropriate, would be unlawful, and that's not what's going on here. We're talking about the position. I just wanted to say that. So it feels squirmy because it's uncomfortable to have your position talked about in public. Other discussion?
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Carter.
I don't support the amendment. I appreciate the Finance Committee's position on trying to control expenses where expenses can be controlled and where changes have occurred. But we did. We spent the better part of a month at select board and budget meetings talking about the positions, what needed to be done. Really good input from the people that are in those positions on what it really takes to serve the public and to take care of state mandated reports and forms and all the other requests that come in, including every week when we have a select board meeting, what we put on their agenda as far as things that we want to know over the next week, 2 weeks, a month, research and that sort of thing. As far as the salary rate, and that's how we came up with the hours. As far as the salary rate, we find that if you compare them to the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, the report that they have, these are very competitive, but not any higher than the middle of those rates that are out there. You'd only have to read the paper to see what other towns are paying for executive administrators and the like, and the staff that we have. As far as the assistant clerk, municipal clerk, I don't see how they got her to agree to the job at the low rate they hired her in the first place, under $13. But we find that she's doing a great job in the office, and it's making a huge impact on how the public is served when they come in to get their business done. So I don't support the Finance Committee's amendment. I feel that the numbers that the Select Board came up with in consultation with the Finance Committee are right in line with where they should be. Any argument that we need to be cautious and saving money and refusing people proper compensation on a year when we're all set up to take $200,000 to put in stabilization seems to be a false argument to me.
Thank you. Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Right here. Behind.
He can go in and I'll follow. It's okay.
Okay, you can go, then she'll go.
I guess I disagree somewhat because I've never heard in any type of employment environment where an employee's recommendation as to the time they need is accepted without a clear analysis and tracking. Okay, we're in an information age now where we have no excuse not to be able to track an employee's time, what they actually utilize it for, and to see whether overtime payment for a temporary increase in time is more cost effective than raising a salary for years to come. And that's all I'm asking, is whether the actual due diligence was done to determine whether in fact the workload and how the time was utilized by the employee justify the increase that the Select Board and the Finance Committee is recommending.
Well, I recall, hopefully one was also, that in the fall, the select board had requested that the employees, the town hall staff, complete their hours indicating what projects they had worked on. And I forget whether that might have been in October, possibly September. I looked back over different timesheets. That was not accomplished. That's one. Number two, the reason that I raised my hand to speak is I am in support of the Finance Committee's recommendation and the amendment, mostly because I think it's time to look at all salaries in all departments and do everybody at the same time. I've been concerned for a period of time when those first responders that come from the fire department get $10.50 an hour to hopefully save your life, or possibly save your life. So it really needs to be looked at. The Finance Committee is interested in taking on that task. I think that's fantastic, but we do need to look at them all and perhaps do all town employees at the same time. And I consider all departments part of it. It's our budget that we vote for them, so I consider them part of it.
Further discussion from anyone who hasn't been heard? Mr. Cranston.
Doug Branson, 326 Burke Drive. I feel that it's hard to compare those two particular examples to the emergency people do not do that necessarily as a full-time job, therefore they're compensated through their regular job for their income. These people that work here, it is their income and should be fully funded for the time they put in and their abilities to do so.
Thank you. I do know that Mr. Murray and Mr. Fuller have their hands up and I'm looking for people from the floor. Okay, Mr. Murray.
What the moderator may mean to say is he's looking for other better ideas than what we have to offer here. I would just like to speak again on behalf of the amendment to say that I think a valid point is being raised about how these hours and wages came about. And indeed, while the Finance Committee has agreed that we think the hours is a reasonable estimate, it is, I think, quite accurate that we haven't done a detailed analysis of that, and that might bear reinspection. But certainly in the area of wage rates, if those get awarded at this time at the proposed level, those are virtually irreducible, it seems to me, thereafter. It's hard to bring those back down. And I'm well aware, as I think many are here, that if you start to look around different communities and so on, what you compare is often not a direct or precise comparison. It depends upon the job descriptions, it depends upon the scope and nature of the work that one position in that town has versus the position we call the same thing in this town. And so for that reason in particular, we felt that we ought to be rather cautious in making these kinds of increases. And that does not preclude us from doing further increases in the future, maybe for these positions, but perhaps for other positions. And so if you compound the additional hours plus the proposed wage rates, which are, I remind you, 25% and 15%, that's quite a large undertaking that we have now committed ourselves to as a town in our budget. And again, this is not directed at individuals by no means, but it's just being, I think, extra cautious as to what we do with compensation in this town. All the other employees are being talked about in terms of a 2% cost of living adjustment, which is pretty paltry at that. And we want to be careful that we just don't further distort what is arguably at this point a somewhat disorganized, not terribly coherent, systematic wage structure across our entire employee population in town.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler.
I agree with Ted on several issues, but I would argue that you vote down this amendment. The employees were in a somewhat difficult position, and I don't know if you catch the drift here a little bit. I clearly remember, as Paulette said, that when I first came on board, that we asked all of these were hourly employees to record all of their time. And I found out later in the fall that much more time was required of their position. Well, the situation, upon asking them why they didn't, was, in my words, one of dedication. They had a job to do, but they did not want the deficit spent. Each one of their budgets is a line item on this. And if they spent over the hours, even though there was some room for being able to allocate revenue with expenses, for the most part, they wanted to live up to what the town meeting last year said they would do for the amount of hours. But if they walked out at the end of their 25 hours, they would come back the next week to find a mountain more of work. So they were in a difficult position. Had they been salaried last year, And we gave him a job code function to say, we want to track on all of your hours. It would have been far more appropriate because we wouldn't have run afoul to the fair labor law. So I just want to be very transparent on that whole issue. We did not know it was happening. I did not know it was happening until later on in the game, and they were extremely dedicated and they were doing their job beyond their 25 hours a week. And yes, when we asked them, what does this job take here in Ashfield, which is different than Conway and different than Buckland, they gave us an assessment on what it would take, and we trusted what they said. So, and when we compare that with FERCOG also not only has dollars, but it has hours beside it. We ended up with what we consider a fair assessment of the rate, which is in the article as stated. So,
Thank you. We are on the amendment on Article 12 of 28. The proposed amendment would have an executive administrator line, a reduction in the motion from 28,080 to 26,216, and on the assistant municipal clerk line from 24,960 from 24,960 to 22,425, and the bottom line change would be 288,047.
No, that's what I said. It's, oh, you changed it?
You're not.
I'm sorry.
I said the main motion was, the amendment would be changing from 283 to 648 is what I, that was.
Say again the last number.
The last number on the main motion is 288,047. With the amendment, it would be 283,648, I believe. Is that correct? Okay. So that's the amendment that's on the floor. On the amendment, Mr. Newell.
When we had the finance committee with the select board looked at what actuarial information we had, statistics we had, FERCOG information we had, we were persuaded that we are a little under the game here, too low on some of these salaries. At the time we were doing that, Conway was employing the first year administrator with an hourly rate equivalent of 25 an hour, well above what we are currently offering our executive administrator. So we agree, we are united in our view that reform is needed, and the key is how to do it intelligently. And when we saw the numbers in front of us, we asked for statistics, not just for town staff, but for all of our employees, whether on wage, salary, or stipend. And we were alarmed with what we saw, the disparity. Not going to be particular, because it would be a little embarrassing. And so I want to reemphasize a point that Kat made, and that is we really need to roll up our sleeves and take a look at how we're compensating our officials. Yes, we support what I think is a very generous package, but I'm wondering whether in going to the select board's proposal, we might be moving a little bit too fast. For example, if the hours are approved and the pay rate is improved, what we as a town have been doing is saying we're making a commitment to increase our compensation package for the position of the administrative assistant municipal clerk up about 95%. That's a big decision. I went through something like this before when I was in my first years at Mohawk Region as a business manager, and I came in, and the school committees were concerned about the turmoil and the disparity from one position to another. I can remember everybody was, so to speak, on their own. And in time, it was obvious that what we needed was to create some strategic grading system and have uniform rewards for each grade based on seniority that's stepped in a grade system. And in doing that, we found that in some cases, some employees really needed to be moved up from where they were. But it couldn't be done all at once. It had to be phased in. Likewise, there were some employees who thought that it was probably relatively over. And that meant that we didn't want to deny them increases, but we had to have a slow rate of increase. It took a while to phase it in. And I'm frankly concerned about one of the two positions here that we may regret moving this forward as aggressively as we are. I like the idea of phasing this in. I like the idea of taking it easy. Step one, I like our amendment, and I think it makes sense. Step one, let's go with that amendment. Step two, let's go with a careful look and a study at all of our employees, and we'll be back here next year. Thank you.
I would surmise that maybe this is our...
Nina Kohler.
Nina Kohler, 168 Bay Road. This might be the beginning of the first phase, that we're underpaying our staff for quality work and a lot of overtime. And so we begin here, and then we look at everybody else next year. But let's start here with our administrative assistants.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? This would be a third time. Mr. DeHart wants to speak to the amendment a third time. Is there any objection?
I don't object to that, but I don't speak. What I'm hearing is that clearly there needs to be an analysis done across the board to see where we are and where we should need to go. You've thought about that. What's a reasonable expectation that the townspeople could have in terms of how long that would take? Could that get accomplished in less than a year?
In my opinion, I think the answer is yes. I think this committee has the ability, the finance committee has the ability to bring a report back to you next year. It might include the establishment of a grade or break step system. I don't know. I don't want to commit to that. I'm only one person. Mr. Chairman, would you agree?
Well, obviously, the finance committee hasn't deliberated on that question.
We haven't talked about it in detail, but I would think we should certainly be able to do this within a year's time, perhaps sooner. I couldn't say how much sooner. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Ross and then Mr. Kohler. Oh, no, wait a minute. Mr. DeHart, the third time.
My question would be, who should take the lead on such a study? I'm a little surprised to hear that it would be the Finance Committee. We're talking about the way to accomplish the work that needs to be done for the town. And it's being done with the assistance of these three positions. Is that the best way to organize it, or should we reorganize it somehow? I guess I would look to the select board to develop a plan, which would then be costed out, and the Finance Committee would comment on it. But I'm a little surprised to find that the Finance Committee would take the lead on that.
Okay. Mr. DeHart, Mr. Kohler. I'd like anybody who speaks who's already spoken to say something that hasn't been said, or else we don't have to hear it. We're on Article 12 of 28, and it is now to apply.
It's a beautiful spring day. Dave DeHart, 57 Meadow Lane. 2 points. I think Mr. Newell said something which kind of raised concern in my mind. He said that in looking at the executive administrator of this town, they looked at the town administrator, Conway. Now, I would point out those are 2 very different positions with 2 very different job responsibilities. They're not the same position. So comparing the 2 salaries would not be appropriate. Secondly, what Mr. Robson referred to, I think the town bylaws created a personnel board. And part of the charge of the personnel board is to recommend wage and hourly rates for certain positions in the town. I think that's the appropriate place for this kind of analysis to take place.
I know Mrs. Kohler, your hand is up. Mr. Cranston, second time.
Jeff Manson, Reverend Drive. In the past, we've had some employees work here for close to 20 years at perhaps 50% of a comparative salary. I think we have 2 very good, and perhaps three, I don't know who the third one is, and I didn't get here early enough, but we have two very good people working for the town at this point. And if that brings them up to a normal wage for their job and their expertise, then I think that's good. And we should go ahead and increase to that amount. And then do a study by whichever board is appropriate to determine what the salary should be for everyone.
Thank you. I'm not condemning you to use this. We should stay away from the people in the position and talk to them.
Yeah, I guess fundamentally I agree with both Dave and the Finance Committee, but my concern is all timing. When I first came aboard, I was expecting to see employee position descriptions and policies in the fall. That was the last we knew, in the autumn of last year. They've been diligently working on a lot of information, but the Select Board has a lot to approve before we do any comparative analysis. My estimate, when I hear the Finance Board say that they can do it in a year, is perhaps you could do it in a year, but first you need the position descriptions accepted in their entirety by the Select Board, and then you've got to go out and you've got to do a survey. So I would say at the best, in my opinion, you're talking a couple of years. And I don't think it's appropriate to hold up fair salaries or fair compensation rates as I consider it. So I just have nothing more to go on than that. They're still in development, is what they are. And it's not an easy task.
Thank you. Nothing to that.
It's something.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
The Finance Committee, the Select Board, the Personnel Board, I mean, everybody can work very diligently on these things, but on the job descriptions and so forth, and come up with some type of plan. But as far as gathering information and digesting it and making reasonable decisions, we've just been through 3 full months, February, March, April, of going over, and one of the big topics that we discussed at length were town hall employee positions. Should they be exempt, non-exempt, salaried, hourly, and those types of things. I mean, we spent a lot of time, not only the Select Board by themselves, but with the Finance Committee. And during all those discussions, there were these nodding heads. Well, yes, yeah, we agree, yes. Here, when the actual recommendations are being made, the Finance Committee wants to modify that. And I understand that, and that is their position and their charge. But the number that we have on the Select Board warrant was voted unanimously by the Board of Selectmen at the time that we decided on what that salary needed to be. So certainly everyone has the opportunity to change their mind. I find it a little perplexing after all the discussion we had. But it hasn't been an easy set of situations for the town hall staff to work within on an hourly type schedule. And the executive administrator's salary that is being proposed now is within what it was originally advertised at. So it's to say that it's a huge jump is probably a bit of an overstatement, I believe.
Is it something that hasn't been said?
I would like to make a couple of impressions perhaps, and that is that while the Finance Committee, I think, was willing to work over the next year to undertake such a study, I can appreciate that this is perhaps not properly our charge. Maybe the Select Board, maybe the Personnel Committee, and others. But we do believe that this is necessary. So don't take it as gospel that we need to be doing it. However, we'd be happy to kind of comment on these studies of this type. The second point is, going to Mr. Carter's comment just now, it seemed to me clear that while the Select Board was unanimous in approving these proposed increases, it was equally obvious that the Finance Committee in these discussions was equally unanimous against those particular prescriptions, based upon a number of conversations we had over at least a couple of meetings where we had different figures. We've modified our position a bit, but from the outset, I think we were agreed that those looked like increases a bit too far at this point.
On the content of the proposed amendment, any further discussion? Ready to vote on the proposed amendment? Let me restate it. I'm going to read the main motion numbers on the committee and then the proposed amendment. So, the changes that are proposed by the amendment in the executive administrator position would go from $28,080 to, if amended, $26,216. On the assistant municipal clerk position, it would go from $24,960 to, if amended, $22,425. The total would go from $28,047, if amended, to $283,648. Everybody clear? Yes. So a yes vote means you, Mr. Murray. Just for clarification.
Excuse me, but I thought you said the total was 28,047. It's 288, isn't it?
283,648.
No, but the first number you mentioned, I think you read as 28,047.
Should I? 288. That's mistake number 6. Okay, from 288,047, changing it to, if amended, 283,648. Okay, everybody clear? All right, all those in favor of that amendment as proposed, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. No. I don't think I can call that one. I'm afraid we'll need our tellers. So, we're going to instruct it. Okay, all those who want to say yes to the amendment, please raise your one hand. Okay, they put their hands up? Yes. Okay. All right, all those opposed, please raise one hand. Okay, you put your hands down. Thank you. Yes to the amendment was 11. No to the amendment was 28. The amendment fails. We're back to the main motion. Discussion on the main motion. Let's do the hurt.
One question, on the line item of information technology expenses, the 12,900. Could someone explain please what that is for exactly? And the other question I have is the legal expenses, line item of 10,000. I'm just curious as to, given the discussion and deliberation that went on at the last special town meeting, why that has remained the same as last year.
Mr. Carter.
Information technology expenses, yeah, 12,900, that is rolling up a lot of the IT needs that normally got split up in different departments. We have a new IT committee that's helping us try to streamline and be more efficient about upgrading our needs for information. Of course, it all has, quite a bit of it is triggered by getting the fiber optic into the town hall and so forth. So instead of each department putting in a request and, you know, I need a computer, I need a printer, we're trying to put that all together in one place so that can be managed more efficiently. That is new money and also money that we've taken from other departments. The key word on the budget is it is a budget. And $10,000 is probably just a good guess. Here lately, we've not seen the activity, the reason to call town council as often as we have maybe in the last 6 or 7 months. Will that change or not change? That the proof will be in the pudding on that. Certainly, if we do start using legal expense a lot and we need more money, certainly that would be a reason for a special town meeting to discuss that and to know what's going on. But it's a good place to start, $10,000. My hope is that we would use way less than half of that. But we haven't. I haven't, in my short stint as chairman, given a whole lot of approval for people to call town council to, you know, unless it's really necessary.
Thank you. Further discussion on the main motion on Article 12. Ready to vote? All those in favor of raising and appropriating a total of $288,047 for general government expenses, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 13, is there a motion?
I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for the following capital expenditures. Ambulance capital, $3,082. Firehouse and town hall capital, $10,000.
Second.
Second.
Any explanation?
Yes, thank you. The ambulance is the debt service assessment from Highland Ambulance EMS Inc. And the $10,000 for the firehouse and the town hall are monies to start work on needed improvements to the building. At the firehouse, there's a need for an electrical upgrade and some structural, and there are some needs for town hall as well.
Thank you. Is there a recommendation for
I was
finance?
going to say the building committee. Right? No, I don't see them. I was going to say they might have had some input on things regarding the town.
Sorry, I did not need to.
No, my mistake.
Finance?
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, we recommend this unanimously.
Thank you. Discussion?
Can I correct?
Yes, you may.
I do see somebody from the town hall building committee. They would like to make some input on the town hall.
Ms. Quigley, would you like to comment?
I don't have anything prepared. Mary Fitzgibbons can probably correct me whether or not we're seeding some money to some crawl space improvements. Is that included in here? And maybe some of the painting and repairs we need to do. Some of the costs that we really got.
Some of the costs will go with that will be covered
We
up.
didn't ask for specific amounts, as far as I know.
Scar.
Yeah, the $10,000 in this capital account really started 6 weeks ago. How long ago did you go on vacation, maybe, right? 60 days before. But a small group of us, the fire chief had come in during the budget discussion and came in with a very conservative budget, which we always appreciate, but then there's always a list of things where we really need to be looking at this and this and this. And one of the things that caught our attention was the electrical service in the firehouse. And so Ricky Carroll and I, and there was quite a little group of us. Brian Clark was there. We started in the firehouse looking at the electrical service. Robbie Poisson was there to give us some guidance. And it's an old building. It looks great, but it's an old building and the wiring has been updated and patched and so forth. And it's in need of some repair. And of course that discussion carried on to some of the computers they need for emergency communication and so forth are located in the town hall. So if the power goes out and they need a generator in the firehouse, they have to run an extension cord over to run the computers in the town hall. And that brought up a whole discussion on how to update this whole system along with the IT committee to try to gather some funds to upgrade the electrical service, which isn't any too good here in the town hall also. So this $10,000 is just some seed money. I envision this account being used much the same way we made an account so we could do improvements to the park. That we'll come up with a plan, and we'll put money into it, we'll find out what best suits the town hall for the future, hopefully a longer-term vision than we've had the opportunity to have in the past, and come up with that type of plan. So that's really where this $10,000 comes from, and there'll have to be some type of committee or subcommittee that really starts looking at that, because I'm not going to speak for Ricky, but I think it turned into a lot more than I envisioned on that Saturday morning when we came down. So, to really do a good job and look at it.
Every 200 years, they want more money to wire this building. Anyway, further discussion. Ready to vote? Article 13? Okay, all those in favor of raising and appropriating $3,082 for ambulance capital and $10,000 for firehouse town hall capital, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? That passes unanimously. Do I hear a motion on Article 14?
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Carter.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town rate and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for public safety expenses. There's a whole list that people should be looking at, and the total is $181,505.
There a second? Second. Thank you. Would you like to say anything about this item?
Oh, let's see. We separated out that in the police department, that probably would be the single biggest place when you add those up. This is when you tally up the police chief's salary, police department, and fuel, you're going to get in the neighborhood of $112,000, right in that neighborhood. That's an increase of about 15, escapes me right at the moment. It's going to be pretty close to $15,000. We did add a stipend for the firearms clerk. Betty LaShure issues the firearms licenses and has been doing that with no compensation at all. And there has been, it's amazing to me, signing the warrants, the spike in people getting their firearms permits and so forth. And with what frequency they do that. The total police department budget increase, we have to remember that we put in about another $6,000 there at the special town meeting in March. So when we compare it to last year's, that's not exactly correct. But The police department expenses, 4480, 2% increase for reserve officers, an additional $1.20 an hour for the corporal. There are some additional hours for the reserve officer.
Thank you. Is there a recommendation for finance committee?
Yes, Tom, thank you, Mr. Broderick. Tom Schreiber from Watson Road. We unanimously voted against the recommendation. And we'd like to file a motion to amend. In place of the $50,835 shown for the police department, we'd like to insert $45,035, making for the total for the public safety $175,705.
And was that unanimous, the motion to amend?
Yes,
You're in favor of the article, but for the amendment?
correct.
Okay. Very good. Would you like to explain that?
Yeah, I mean, among the components reflected in the line item is a proposed increase of reserve hours from 33 hours to 40 hours. So that was our biggest contention of what the select board was recommending, was that 7 hours extra police, whether it was necessary or needed in the town. And that's where we're getting the difference of basically $5,800 a year, is in that extra hours that we're putting the police force out for us. We did, like Tom had mentioned, we had to go back to the special town meeting to get more in the budget for the police. So we've got that included in there. We've got an extra 1,000 in there for Fall Festival. We've got an extra 1,000 in there for any added investigative work that may come up. And I guess that was pretty much what we did. But, so that's really the contention, is whether we need a police force that's 7 hours more or not, was our biggest fundamental difference.
Thank you, Mr. Dr.
Can someone tell me how many hours the police chief works to get $56,000 a year?
Yeah, he's working 40 hours.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. DeHer.
It's a point of order, in order to make a further amendment, you may not know before I say anything about the...
I'm sorry. The question is a point of order, and whether or not, in order to make a further amendment, has to wait till this amendment. Is this an amendment to the amendment, or is this amendment to the main motion?
Well, in making the amendment, they've made only certain changes to the main motion. What I want to do is further amend the main motion, yes, you're right, to include their amendment plus an additional amendment.
Then we'll rule it in order now, because if we just allow this amendment to be voted on and it was moved, and when it was then voted down, you want to include their amendments with your amendments. So you would like to amend the amendment.
Mr. Moderator, David Bird, 57 Meadow Lane. I would like to amend the amendment, is that the proper term?
That's the proper term.
Okay. To change the fire chief's salary of $3,060 to what it should be appropriately a fire chief's stipend to $7,500. Yes, to change the line item entitled Fire Chief Salary to read Fire Chief Stipend, and for the amount to which is presently $3,060 to $7,500.
Thank you. Is there a second to the proposed amendment? Second. Point of order.
How does this proposal amend our amendment?
Because included in the amendments proposed by you, he wants another change made to the main motion. So, but he also likes the ones that you are proposing, and he wants to amend those as well. So he's going to amend your amendment by changing another line item, just as you did the main motion by changing 2 line items.
So we'll, I'm sorry.
Shouldn't the questions be divided?
Not, if he's saying that in order for, he wants your amendment to also reflect another change. So it's all part of the same res gen side as it says in Roberts. That's a Latin word for the same body. So, saying that, we are now discussing, I see two people who live at the same address, hands go up. And what I want to make sure we're doing is talking to Mr. DeHurt's proposed amendment to the amendment before we vote on the amendment. Okay, Mr. Karen, no, Mr. Ross. Stand up, identify yourself.
Renee Restoff from Taylor Road. I'm just confused because what if we want to say yes to that amendment and we don't want to say yes to, I mean, just theoretically, we're going to say yes.
I'm not telling you what to do, but that means vote down the proposed amendment to the amendment. So you'll have the opportunity to do that first before we go back to just the two changes that are made. We're going to deal with whether there's a third change that people want.
Can we do it the way that he suggested, just have it shoot down?
I'm sorry, this is the way that it should be done. We're going to see whether or not to amend the amendment. We're going to vote on that, yes or no. Then we're going to go back to the main of the amendment before we return to the main motion. Yes.
Tom O'Manick from State True. I'd like to hear Mr. Durhan's justification for his amendment.
Thank you. I think he's filling out the form. The motion should be right, so he's filling it out. Yes.
Page 37, Middle Lane. I make the amendment to the amendment for the following reasons. The fire chief is not a salaried employee of the town. He is an appointed stipend position. He has been since the beginning of time. I've seen what the fire chief has to do nowadays in order to maintain even a quote-unquote volunteer fire department. And the amount that is listed in the article, the main article, is just ridiculous for the amount of work this person has to do. He has to make sure all state regulations are complied with. He has to make sure that everybody has the appropriate training. He spends, that position requires significant hours of time. And a stipend of $3,000 in this day and age is nothing for the amount of work that somebody puts into that position. So I think $7,500 is a reasonable amount, given the amount of time the fire chief puts in now, and the additional time that's going to be required in the future when more regulations come down from the state as to how to run a volunteer fire department. And that's it. Just to correct the nomenclature and to bring the position payment up to what it should be for the responsibility it requires.
Thank you. Anything more on whether or not to amend the amendment? Mr. Murray.
I'm sympathetic to the overall concept expressed by Mr. DeHurt, but I have to say that in light of our earlier discussion, what I believe still to be a need for an overall examination of our salary and stipend structure in town, I would be reluctant to vote for this just based on this material as presented here, as appealing as it is. It also, I think, reveals the extent to which I think this line has been treated as a salary with a 2% increase, when in fact it's more appropriate to consider it a stipend. But the level of stipend, I feel a little bit unsure about voting this out, just pure and simple on the basis of what we heard today. That's not to say it's wrong, it's simply to suggest that I think this fits rather well within our earlier notion of trying to get a more systematic overview of how we're handling salaries, stipends, and so on for town employees.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Moderator, Ron Cohen. Dave, I'd just like to ask you, have you had any chance to compare this to neighboring towns? And I feel the same way as I did in the last article, that if there's a gross inequity, that ought to be taken care of right away. But I have no knowledge of it, so I'm asking you for some basis on that $7,500. I don't know what other fire chiefs make in similar positions.
Is this something new? I'm getting a little bit concerned because it's 2:30 and less than half
work, and if anybody had to do that many hours, $2,500 would be reduced no matter what. But with the state requirements and the safety issues to this town, I think it's necessary to vote.
Thank you, that was obviously responsive. Yes, Sarah.
I can address that a little bit, if it's okay.
Did you guys say your name?
Donna Sarah, Sears Road. Just so that you know, I know that a couple of the other towns, Cummington and Goshen, the town also supplies them with a vehicle, and our chief uses his own vehicle to go to all the calls. So that's one thing I do know. And if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think Goshen, which is obviously a much smaller town than ours, I think they get anywhere between 7,500 and 10,000. I'm not sure on that, but I think I read it somewhere. But I do know about the cars, though. Some of the towns do supply automobiles or trucks for their chiefs.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Cindy Carney, 347 Main Street. Sometimes the town has to decide between all of our financial obligations and looking at things practically, and also letting people know that they appreciate a job well done. The current the current fire chief that we have works and works and works. He keeps the morale up in the fire department. He keeps all of their training up and is looking for more. He is working constantly. This small amount of increase is, from my point of view, is a matter of showing appreciation for a job already done well. Thank you.
I think I'll get you in 1 minute. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at it and realize that, wow, what I said is what it says in Roberts. It really is more like a substitute amendment. It doesn't give people the opportunity to vote on that Mr. Newell was objecting to and as worked there. So I think what we should do is handle this, we'll sever them again. Probably the fairest way to do is if you want the opportunity.
Franklin Wickland, Williamsburg Road. My question is pretty simple. If you vote for Mr. Hartstein, which I'm not disagreeing with there's a need, you are increasing the amount, and that cannot be done on the floor unless you reject or the original numbers for the other people. So keep in mind that what you say for this affects what you can say legally for the other.
It's a really good point. I want to be reminded. Watch your foot, Frank. Get to try out that new rescue truck.
We need him for the council meetings.
The posted amount is the 181,505, and what he's suggesting is if we exceed the scope of what was posted, that arguably someone would not have come to town meeting had they known it was going to be a few $1,000s more than it actually reads.
So can you do a point of order?
I'm sorry?
Can you do a point of order on what Mr. Whitmore said?
I thought that's what I'm doing. I'm explaining. Well, I don't know what you mean when I do a point of order.
Sorry. Go ahead and explain.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm explaining. I think what Mr. Whitman said is that if you exceed the posted amount of 181,505, that there's an argument that is beyond the scope of the posted warrant. And there's some discretion on the part of the chair to determine what I always do, as you know, who have been here for a long time, is I ask you whether a $2,000 roughly increase or $3,500, whatever that percentage is, on the $181,000 warrant is to you beyond the scope, understanding that there might be a human being out there who says, oh, I would have come to town meeting if I knew it was 185,000 instead of 181,000. I'd be willing to take that risk when it's a nominal percentage increase. If you're willing to take that risk, if one person objects to that, then we should exceed the scope.
That's the way we've always handled it since I've been operating for the last decade. Is that what you meant by a point of order?
Yes.
Okay.
Although it wouldn't be changing upwards if both amendments go at the same time.
No, but it could conceivably if one of them was and two didn't. Right? So what I was just saying before, because I am going to allow, well, Mr. Newell suggested we should separate of the amendment and the amendment to the amendment. Why are you so confused? Did I say something? I thought I said I was going to separate.
So which one are we discussing right now?
Right now, we're talking about Mr. DeHurst. Normally, it would be an amendment to the amendment, but we're going to separate, so we're talking right now about a $7,500 stipend, rather than a $3,500 stipend. $3,000 stipend, right? And we've been forewarned that there might be a scope issue at the end of the day, which we have to think about, because if we say no to the Finance Committee's proposed amendment, and yes to Mr. DeHurst's proposed amendment, we're going to exceed the posted alert that this article is going to be for $181,500. Am I confusing anybody? Okay, confusing me. I want to hear from some people I haven't heard. What's the point of order? Rise to a point of order.
The point of order is that if you sever the motions, you run into that issue. If you don't sever the motions, treat my motion as an amendment to their amendment, then we're closer to the scope than we would be if the motions were severed.
I think you're right, except that I'm getting a sense of the meeting that there are some people who want to be able to entertain your increase in that stipend, but one might not want to entertain that decrease. So by me treating it as an amendment to an amendment, I'm foreclosing some people from being able to vote the way they want. So I think what makes more sense is to get people to vote the way they want. We'll see how it shakes out, and then we'll hopefully return to the main motion before nightfall.
Mr. Fitzgerald. That's two argumentative. Whatever you ask. Agreeing with David would it make more sense to then sever them in the order that they were proposed, so that if the first one passes, there will be money to cover the second one.
That makes sense.
We go back to discussing the first one.
That doesn't make sense. Dr. Martin.
I want to talk about Mr. Hurst. Is that timely now then?
Is the sense of the meeting that we should return to the finance committees and deal with theirs, which seeks a reduction in total amount of money before we deal with, okay, that's the sense of the meeting. Should we remember your thought? Okay. Any further discussion of anything that hasn't been said? About the motion to amend.
Are we on our amendment?
Yeah. Does everybody get it? We're on their amendment now. We'll afterwards get to Mr. DeHurst's amendment. I apologize for the confusion.
Speaking to the first proposed amendment, which, if you'll recall, reduces the police department expense line on this schedule from $50,835 to $45,035. That's a $5,800 reduction, which represents the annual cost of increasing the reserve officer hours per week from 33 hours to 40 hours. The basic reason we are against this is that in other parts of this police expense budget, there are provided $1,000 as recited for Fall Festival and $1,000 for added investigative work, two of the sources of cost overrun this past year in the police department budget. Moreover, I guess our final conclusion is we think there are adequate police services available because we have a chief who's hired for 40 hours a week, plus the 33 hours a week for reserve officers. That's 73 hours a week, which on average is about 10 hours of coverage per day, 7 days a week. We feel that's sufficient. We should not further expand the police budget.
Is there anything that hasn't been said? Mr. Newell.
Mr. Robert, I have one thing that hasn't been said.
Okay, good.
Because you always do.
The number one reason I believe that this committee united unanimously on this is that the case for additional reserve officer hours was never made. We asked for it repeatedly. The case was not made to expand the reserve officer hours.
Thank you. Anything else? On the finance committee motion, it hasn't been said.
I'd like to move the question.
Okay, is there a second? All right, non-debatable, not amendable, requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of cutting off the bidding on the finance committee's proposed amendment to reduce the police department expenses. Everybody know this, from 50,835 to 45,035, thereby reducing the total to 175,705. Everybody care what you're voting on? If you vote yes, you're voting for that reduction. Oh, you voted. Thank you. You voted to cut off the bid. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. I find that is 2/3. Anybody disagree with my ruling? Okay, so we cut off the debate and are going to the amendment. Again, the amendment would, in place of 50,835 for police department, insert 45,035 for changing the total to 175,705. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Oh, so that motion carries. Okay. Now, Mr. Hurst's motion.
I'm confused. What did we just vote on? I'm confused about what we're doing.
We just voted to approve the finance committee's amendment, lowering the amount of money for police department expenses by $5,000. That's what we just did. Am I confusing the meeting?
No.
Okay, good. All right, so now we have another proposed amendment which we put off till later to increase the stipend from $3,000 to $7,500. And you wanted to speak to that one more time, is that right?
Just procedurally, now, the amendment has been amended to fall to a certain level to where this motion that I'm making, this amendment, would wouldn't surpass the posted amount.
Everybody understand that? So the concern that would exceed the scope of the posted warrant, now it wouldn't, because the amount of the increase is less than the amount that we just reduced the total by. Yes?
I just want to, I'm interested in the motion that he's making to
Okay.
amend. And I just want to say that, you know, however I vote for that in no way reflects what I think about our fire chief, but what it does reflect is that I feel like I'm being ambushed, and I feel like that there's no underpinning for the amount. And in view of what Ms. Sarno just said, it may be an underpayment of our fire chief. And I just feel like if we're going to actually recognize his service, we should do it in a way that has some sort of systematic approach to it. Like maybe he should be getting a car, and maybe he should be getting a $10,000 stipend. So I just think that amount, I have no idea if that's adequate. It doesn't mean I don't think that he's worth every penny of that and more, but I don't think that I have no reason for believing that that's an adequate amount. So when I vote against his thing, it's not a reflection of how I feel about our chief.
When I go against it, please put out the fire now.
This discussion at this point, Don Robinson, Northville Road. This discussion reminds me of the one we had on the town hall staff issue, where it was said, I thought with considerable weight, that we should first be doing a thorough study and et cetera, et cetera. And some of us, while very sympathetic with that view, also felt that what you do for a budget for 1 year does not determine what you do in subsequent years. And therefore, I voted in favor of that, of the select board's proposal on that one. Here again, we have a situation where we're beginning to wonder whether we're paying our fire chief anyway adequately or at all. And, the suggestion has been made that we're not doing it. But remember, we're only doing it for 1 year. That is, when we do this comprehensive survey of the personnel and whether we're compensating them adequately or not, presumably the fire chief's salary will be included in that survey. And so on that basis, I will support Mr. DeHurst's amendment.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment to increase the fire chief's salary? Yes.
So, Tom O'Neill, Stage Road. I guess, kind of to echo Don's comments, I'm really conflicted in my thoughts on this particular amendment because, as we went through earlier, there definitely appears to be a need for an assessment or an analysis. And so, I think the way I'm leaning on this one is in support of the amendment, but implore and emphasize the kind of the sense from the town floor that I'm getting that, as I know you will, be efficient and expeditious in getting this analysis done as quickly as reasonably possible. Coherent. Thank you.
Very coherent. Mr. Carter? Yes. Mr. Carter and Mr. Murray.
I think this is a great discussion to have. And we've already had it once, and certainly this is a great place to emphasize that we need to take a serious look at these. The fire chief, along with, I think it's through page 3 through 9 or 4 through 9, there's a whole list of people that perform outstanding service in this town for very little, if any, compensation at all. And certainly the fire chief, his career, his public service has certainly been an entire lifetime of working on the fire department. All the things when he brings in his budget and runs through his budget with us and manages his budget the entire time. I've certainly knowing him on the street and seeing him in meetings and so forth, the last thing he's ever going to talk about is his salary or any of that. My personal sense is that I think we're overshooting a little bit on this amendment, although I think it brings up a tremendously good discussion. I think that the fire chief would much rather, and I wish he was here to speak to it, but maybe it's just as well that he's not, but that he'd appreciate support of extra fire gear and things that, improvements to the firehouse to make sure that doesn't burn down. That would be particularly embarrassing, wouldn't it? And to build up that department and keep the volunteers, things that will keep the volunteers that really make the fire department in Ashfield work. I'm not opposed to looking at this, but I don't support the amendment. I do think that it's outside, possibly outside the scope, but that really isn't the point. I think we didn't work our budget around that. And I really think it's, like I said, like very many other public servants, including the moderator who's always looking at the clock here, we don't necessarily get paid for all the time we put in.
I think Mr. Murray was going to speak to the motion to increase the moderator's salary to $7,500.
In your dreams. I just urge everybody here to be thoughtful and careful about how they take a position on this particular amendment. I wish this discussion had come up earlier in the context of our budget hearings, where we could fit this into our earlier set of priorities. My concern again is that once you make this increase, it's not for a single year. If we're hearing that this salary survey is going to take 2 years or even more, I think people are going to have a hard time coming back next year and suggesting, well, instead of 7,500, it's going to be 5,000 or maybe 3,000 or something. I don't think anybody has the stomach to cut back in compensation once it's been awarded. And so I just urge you to be careful on this, that we could all come up with a favorite employee in this town for whom we think they're being underpaid. And I think one by one, we can get ourselves into a great deal of difficulty by doing this without further substantiation. What I've heard today, while well-intended, and I regard highly the fire chief just as much as anyone, I think, we've got to be careful that we go about this with some careful rationale and reasoning before we make such increases, because they are virtually irreversible.
Anything that has not yet been said, Mrs. Chairman?
Thank you very much. I wished I had thought of this during the budget season myself, and I agree with you with that. And I do agree with the amendment being put forward. I'm aware from talking with the fire chief, there are a number of rules and regulations coming down from the state that cause for additional hours on his part, additional training for the call department, and so I do support the amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll.
Ricky Carroll, Beach Street. While I agree with the points on both sides, I do agree with the amendment because I guess I have one question. I heard earlier someone ask a question about how many hours the police chief works. I wonder if anybody in here knows how many hours a week the fire chief works. 24/7 was the answer. I think that really says a whole lot about this town and what we're paying our employees.
Dr. Robinson.
I question, Mr. Mayor, with respect, I question the notion that this increase, once voted, will become permanent. Because one thing that will intervene between today and next year's budget hearings is the fire chief's own testimony on the question. And if Tom is right, that he would rather have equipment and whatever else for his people, my guess is that if he comes in sort of wishing the money had been allocated another way, it will be following his lead, and you will listen carefully to that recommendation. So I don't regard this as a permanent change. I regard it as a gesture of support and encouragement for the position of fire chief, if you will, which will be reviewed in the larger context in the coming months.
Anything that has not yet been said in Mr. DeHart's motion to increase the fire chief's stipend? Has not been said. Mr. Miller.
So, Mr. Moderator, we're thinking about rewarding justly, equitably, an office that we feel is underpaid. So, in choosing to take the largesse that we just acquired, how do we know what the greatest injustice is? Can we be sure it is the fire chief, or might it be someone else?
Ms. Sarah.
Donna Sarah, Sears Road. Full disclosure, I'm in the fire department. And I do see the work of the fire chief, I see the work of the townspeople, I see the work of the police chief and the police. So I think it would be important to keep each department sort of separate because their jobs are very separate. You have the police chief who does certain things, but the people who administer our town, it's separate. The fire chief, if you look historically, has always been a stipend position. And I've seen, and I hate to, and it's coming from a personal thing, I'll admit, he works really, really, really hard. And we do not see half of what he does, and where he goes, and how he does it, and the training that's involved. And I don't, whether it be our current fire chief, or our past fire chief, or our future fire chief, I think $7,500 is fair and equitable. I do agree that, first of all, that he would be the last person to stand up and ask for his money. So therefore, I think it's up to us as the townspeople to say, look, we appreciate our chief. He's not going to ask you for the money, so we'll ask you for it. And the other thing, too, I think which is important, is that that we need to look at all of the salaries of all of our employees, make sure it is fair and equitable. But at this point in time, I've been in the town a long time, and I've seen this come up often around, analyzing, and it doesn't happen quick enough. because people need to have their money now, because a lot of folks live, day to day on their salaries, and there's no point in waiting any longer. I think we should just go ahead and let's give the chief his increase. Thank you.
Gerald, I'd like to move the question. Is there a second? Motion to come to debate, moved and seconded, non-debatable, non-amendable, requires a 2/3 majority. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. Opposed? I find that was 2/3. Anybody disagree with me? Okay, so we'll move to the amendment. The amendment proposes that in the line for fire chief salary, calling it a stipend of $3,060, will be increased to $7,500. If you vote yes, it's to make that increase. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The amendment carries.
Abstain.
Abstain, the abstention.
I've heard it, so.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we're back to the main motion. The public safety expenses as amended. The reduction that you approved, the increase that you approved. Do we have a bottom line total?
180,145.
Could you repeat that? 180,145 would be the new total. Thank you for whoever did that. Everybody, any further discussion on the main motion?
I'm sorry, could you state the total again?
Yes, 180,145 would replace the number 181,505. Everybody clear? Any further comments, questions? Ready to vote? All those in favor of Article 14 as amended, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 15, would you like your motion?
Mr. Monitor,
Mr. Coley.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for cultural and recreational expenses. Belden Memorial Library, $37,000. Belden Memorial Park, $11,271. And Veterans Graves, $1,000 for a total of $49,271.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Anything to say about that? Or?
Real quickly, I think the biggest line item on this is the Belden Memorial Library. I apologize. Ron Kohler, 168 Bailey Road. And that was for, if I recall, Saturday hours and compensation for replacement on vacation time. Is that correct?
It's mostly.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
President Eisenberg, Ashfield Mountain Road. It's mostly the salary position, which is Irene Branson volunteers 2 days a week, and on Saturdays she works at the and that's the difference.
Thank you. Your recommendation for the Finance Committee?
Mr. Moderator, Finance Committee recommends one abstention due to relationship.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Any discussion? Ready to vote? Oh, you're getting worn out, aren't you? All in favor of Article 15 to raise and appropriate a total of $29,271 for our library, our park, and our veterans' graves, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Unanimous. Thank you. Article 16. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town authorize the select board to approve a sum not to exceed $2,000 to pay for history project expenses and to transfer the sum from grant program income.
Thank you. Do you have anything to explain or?
Second.
Andy, seconded.
Very briefly, the history project is preparing to publish the history of the town, volume 3 of the history of Ashfield. We've been working on it for a number of years on appointment from the select board, I think beginning in 2006. And the history project. And we had, in the first couple of years, appropriations of $900 in 2006 and $500 in 2007. In the meantime, we have been funding our efforts by a variety of fundraising efforts, including the sale of note cards based on drawings given to us by Mimi Pirapan, pottery plates developed for us by Dawn Fessenden based on drawings by Jack Warner. We've also published an Ashfield directory, town directory, in collaboration with St. John's Episcopal Church, and have sold that and raised considerable funds doing that. So we have supported the effort. Since then, we also have a headquarters, which is made available to us by the Park Commission. So we have been proceeding essentially on self-generated funds and facilities given to us by the town in various ways. So we continue to produce this book on a volunteer basis. We have paid nothing to anybody for it, and we will not, except where we need professional help in getting it published in the end. Whatever funds we get here from the town will be devoted to producing a book of high quality and to keeping the costs as low as possible. The reason we're funding it the way we are, that is, this was a suggestion from the select board that we do it through the grant program income and that we just have a sum not to exceed $2,000. The reason we're doing it that way is that we were unable to give the select board and the finance committee a hard estimate of what it would cost to produce this book. And there are a lot of reasons for that at this point. I won't hold you here for a discussion of that. But at any rate, we will submit costs to the select board if this arrangement is approved, up to a sum of $2,000 for the coming year.
Thank you. So as I understand it, you're asking the meeting to authorize the select board to pay up to $2,000 based on those invoices which you submit to the select board. That's correct. Thank you. Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends the article and did so unanimously.
Thank you. Discussion on Article 16.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Mr. Carter.
Just as information for the meeting, there's $21,893 available in grant program income.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We have worn them down. All those in favor of Article 16 to authorize the select board to approve a sum not to exceed $2,000 to pay for history project expenses, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 17.
Yes, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for sanitation services, the total of which is $87,599.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there anything to speak to, or is it self-explanatory? Okay. Is there a recommendation from the Finance?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee supports this article unanimously.
Thank you. Discussion.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Carter.
It's probably important to know the amount of work that goes into holding the operation of the transfer station. We rely heavily on the Hilltown Resource Management and of course Tom Poisson overseeing that operation. I'm always amazed by the amount of recycling our small community does and the dumpsters, and that's a tremendous savings to the town. And everybody should thank each other for that effort. One thing that we'll at some point have to come back to is that DEP has some projects that they would like us to look at as far as the old dump where the transfer station is located. Maybe putting up some berms and a test well and a few other things. We don't have a real good handle on that yet, but I just wanted to forewarn the community that probably late summer or early fall we'll have a better handle on that. We'll most likely need some money to fund that over the next year or two.
Thank you. Discussion? Yes, Ms. Quigley.
Very quickly, Great River Road. Transfer station utilities. Is that just an electric bill for the year?
Yeah.
That's electrical phone.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments, discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor of Article 17, raising and appropriating a total of $87,599 for Hilltown Resource Management Transfer Station and Inspector of Animals, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And that passes unanimously. Article 18, is there a motion? Mrs. Black.
Mr. Moderator, Susan Clark Road. I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for health services. Health agent, $8,000. Health board expenses, $900. Elected board of health stipends, 3 at $750. $2,250 for a total of $11,950.
Is there a second?
Second.
Anything you'd like to say about this?
What I would like to say about this article is that until this morning, I did not know that this budget included an increase in the stipends for the Board of Health. That was a surprise to me. And also to Duncan, the chair of the Board of Health. Our stipends have been at $450. We did not include that in our budget. So I think some explanation may be in order for that. And I'll abstain from any opinion on that.
Good. Thank you. Recommendation to Finance Committee.
Funny that you brought that up, Susan. The Finance Committee is not recommending, or it's recommending against 040. We'd like to move to amend Article 18 to read as follows. In place of the $2,250 shown for health board stipends, insert $1,350, making the total for health services $10,250. And the rationale we have for that is that...
Is there a second to that motion? Okay.
The rationale we have for that is the Finance Committee is concerned that it was not consulted about these and other stipend increases totaling $1,450. And the Select Board proposed these increases after our last joint budget hearing. In the cases of the other stipends, we have not taken issue because they seemed minor adjustments. But in this case, the 3 stipends total $900, or 62% of the $1,450 overall stipend increases. Until we hear further substantiation for these increases, we believe we should keep these stipends at their present level.
Discussion.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Carter.
Very true that we didn't take time to go through adjusting stipends, and there were a great many stipends. Every stipend that was marked in our budget, we reviewed the night that we signed the warrant, trying to update those to what we felt were reasonable levels, or just signs of appreciation for the work and effort that are put into these positions. The ones, there was $50 for the moderator, there was a couple or $300 for town hall steward. We tried to look at most of them right across the board, although we didn't put any increases in for the Board of Selectmen. We felt maybe that was overreaching a bit, but the board did unanimously agree to these stipend increases and put them on the warrant to be addressed. They're very much the same as the stipend adjustments on the percentage-wise as many of the other adjustments. Maybe they are slightly higher, but the thing I try to remind people, in the absence of a Board of Health, the Board of Selectmen become the Board of Health. And I want to show appreciation that I'm not put in that position.
Priceless.
It's priceless.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler.
Ron Kohler, 168 Bailey Road. Man, I tell you, being the first year going through the budget process, I had no idea what it was going to take. I mean, I'm used to sitting on that side, and I thought these budgets were pretty much thrown together and so on and so forth. And I respected what everybody did up here, but my God, I tell you, sometimes I see folks around this table 3 times a week, and staying till 11 o'clock was standard. So I've come through a huge learning process, but I also understand that you can't always have a joint board. You don't always have time to pull 2 boards together. And it was a wonderful experience, it really was. We worked really well together. But we felt that this was an equitable thing to do in our wisdom. And I apologize if there was any offense to that sort of thing on this side. Certainly none was intended. So I do support the original article as stated.
Further discussion on the proposed motion to amend. Ready to vote on the motion to amend? Okay. Although, Mr. Murray, something new to add, right?
I'm not so sure it's new, but it's just a reminder that part of our charge, we believe, as a finance committee, is to ensure that we're being prudent all the way down the road. And so on a lot of these initiatives to achieve what people think to be more appropriate, I think we've also got to be a reminder that we need careful, systematic analysis so that we don't find ourselves willy-nilly doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and in ad hoc fashion getting ourselves into what long-term could be an untenable position for the town.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mrs. Kohler.
I can just talk about Nina Kohler, Bailey Road. I just want to know, so did other stipends go up as well? I haven't been noticing this. Other stipends went up as well. So why is Thank you.
Will somebody answer that question? Mr. Newell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In our enthusiasm to do these equitable things, we have to be careful, I think. I heard my good friends down at the other end of the table speak of the good job done, with the wonderful performance, and there's no doubt about that. The Board of Health has 3 very hard-working members who, by any argument, could easily, we could say they deserve it. But here's the point. When we start treating compensation or stipend adjustments based on the good job that the person does, that person will not be the result. We should be looking at this only as increasing compensation for a position, because their successors may well not deserve it.
Okay, what's the response to Mrs. Kohler's question?
Stipend increases. Okay, we had a stipend increase from $400 on school committee, $450 to $500 apiece. We had, bear with me just a moment, stipend increase to the moderator, $100 to $150. Stipend increase to the emergency manager from $300 to $500. We have a stipend, we have an additional stipend for the firearms clerk that did not exist before. Town hall steward, right? Maybe I missed that one. That's the one I was looking for. That went from $400 to $600. And this isn't to compensate for a job well done. I mean, as much as it is to appreciate people that are actually taking up these positions and taking the responsibility.
Thank you. Anything further, anything new? To offer to the discussion? Okay, we're ready to vote on the proposed amendment to Article 18, which would reduce the total from 11,150 to 10,250 by reducing this elected Board of Health stipends by a total of $1,350. Everybody know what you're voting on? If you vote yes, you're asking for those reductions, right? All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
I would roll that the noes have it. Anybody disagree with my ruling and want to count? Okay, the motion to amend fails. We're back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion on Article 18? Ready to vote? All those in favor of raising and appropriating a total of $11,150 to pay for health services, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 19, do I hear a motion?
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Carter.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for highway and road expenses. For a total of $492,104.
Is there a second? Second. Any explanation?
Just a little changes when you read over the, here, a few changes where we homogenize some accounts together to give the highway superintendent a little leeway on small balances. Machinery expense is now wrapped up into that general highway line. But for the most part, it's not a big change. It's pretty much a mirror from last year. What's added in here this year is $17,000 for lake dam maintenance. Ron Kohler's been pretty much championing or trying to organize our thoughts on what needs to be done with the lake dam. They do an inspection every 2 years, and certainly we need to be concerned when our rating on that slips. So we want to be a little proactive and set some money aside to get some of that done. Some of that work, if time allows, could be done by the highway department. Some by volunteers, certainly. We have to identify that and have some money set aside for that. And also, the other big addition would be retention wall repair. And, reading this, I can see people going, what retention wall are they talking about? Well, if you go down Buckland Road, on the far side of Bronson Avenue, that first house on the corner, that retention wall, there's a stretch of retention wall there where the old Sanderson Academy used to be, which is in poor repair. That's actually owned by the town, not by the trustees of the field. And so we have to develop a plan for that. On now that the weather's nice, maybe tonight we'll want to get out early and go on a little field trip for selectmen's meeting and come up with a plan on that. But there'll probably have to be some engineering and so forth because the wall is drastically close to that home that's right there on the corner. So.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
Yes, the Finance Committee recommends unanimously.
Thank you, sir. Discussion. Any portions? Mr. DeHert.
Just a quick question. The lake dam maintenance is part of 17,000 for the periodic inspection costs. that took place?
No, we made it just as complicated as we could, and we didn't even try. We left that in another line. Oh, I can't, we'll know when we get to it. But that is in a separate line. We set $2,000 aside every year to make sure we have funds for that every 2-year inspection.
In other words, the 17,000 is just for the damn maintenance. Further discussion? Comments, questions on 19? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of raising and appropriating $492,104 for highway and road expenses, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously.
Mr. Muller,
Yes.
Article 14 that already passed has linked the date of inspection for $2,000. That's for that.
Thank you. Perfect point of information is on Article 14, if we had that, Mr. Ritter. Thank you.
I was going for it.
Thank you. So, Article 20.
I move that the town will vote to raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for human services expenses for a total of $41,954.
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Congratulations, sir.
There's somebody here from the senior center. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
Hi. No, it's been a great year.
I'm sorry. There's somebody who's not a registered voter of Ashfield who's the director of the center. Is there any objection to our speaking? Okay.
Say
Identify
hello.
yourself.
Hello. It's been a very good year.
I'm sorry, can you say your name again?
Kathy Bunting.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's been a good year. We appreciate your support and thank you for your continued support. Ashfield has participated strongly and your Council on Aging members very active. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, Finance Committee, we have recommendations.
Mr. Moderator, Finance Committee recommends unanimously for.
Thank you. Any discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor of Article 20, voting to raise and appropriate the total of $41,954 for human services expenses, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 21.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Kohler.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for employee benefit expenses for a total of $158,479.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and second. Is there a recommendation by the Finance Committee?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends this article and did so unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Newell. Discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor of raising and appropriating $158,479 for employee benefit expenses, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously. Article 22.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Carter.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for the Franklin Regional Council of Governments expenses. The total is $47,105.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any explanation needed? This juncture?
These are services that we've been assessed, that we participate in. Certainly we use the accounting function. There is a core assessment that each town is it's a weighted assessment that we pay. But we use them for procurement, bids on, sometimes on sand and gravel and hardtop and oil and fuel and all those things that we need to procure from time to time. And the building inspector program, that $6,500 is in track with their new scheme setup, where before we had a much higher assessment and then we collected the funds, and now we pay a fee and they get the license fees. So. But it certainly does make our math, our numbers are a lot smaller in this, so, in our risk.
Thank you. Is there a recommendation for finance?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee supports the approval of this unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Discussion. Ready to vote on Article 22? Yep. Okay. All those in favor of raising and appropriating a total of $47,105 for the Franklin Regional Council of Government expenses, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 23, is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator. Nancy Officer, Bruce Corner Road. I move that the town appropriate $134,178 for the sewer enterprise fund for sewer expenses, and to meet that appropriation by raising $119,078 from the charges and transferring $15,000 from our retained earnings of the sewer enterprise fund to pay for the sewer expenses.
For a total of?
For a total of $134,178.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any explanation you'd like to give?
We basically have been very close to the level of funding for a few years now. So I have a lot of info from me if you want it, but Betty has run a very ship-shape program and constantly is looking for ways to save money, especially through energy, and that's how we brought to you earlier the idea of reducing electrical costs. The program's running very smoothly. Cost to the actual participants is actually slightly reduced from a couple of years ago. So things are running well.
Thank you. The Finance Committee, is there a recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee recommends unanimously.
Thank you. Discussion. We ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor of appropriating $134,178 for the sewer enterprise fund, meeting that appropriation by raising $119,178 for sewer charges and transferring $15,000 from retained earnings of the sewer enterprise funds for a total of $134,178 to pay for sewer expenses, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That too passes unanimously. Article 24. Mr. Gardner.
Oh, yes. Moderator. I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for debt expenses. Short-term interest, $7,500. Town common principal, $30,000. Town common interest, $1,320. Highway debt on the truck, $49,541. Highway debt on the garage, $80,790. Fire debt on the truck that just got delivered today, $49,396 for a total of $218,547. New total, $217,597. No, that.
Yeah, because the interest is at 27.
Right.
49, so it's 48, 446.
Oh, I'm sorry. Fire debt on the truck, the correction there, the fire debt on the truck is $48,446.
And the total is $217,597.
I guess I really wasn't ready for this article. You snuck up on me.
I think you did a heck of a good job.
But the $30,000 from town common principal is not raise and appropriate, that's transfer from free cash.
Okay, good. Is there a second?
Second.
Obviously, the sum being lower than the posted sum on the warrant, it's clearly within the scope. Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee as to the new total moved of $217,597 and the fire debt of the truck, $48,446?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends unanimously.
Thank you. Discussion? Over. Question from Mr. Rogers. Mr. Ferguson.
Tom, Jan Rogers, Fraser Road. Tom, you just said that the town common principal would not be raising and appropriating, it would be coming from free cash?
cash.
So would that make our total for $30,000 less? I mean, is
The
that?
total of the expenses.
Motion says to appropriate.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, I just need clarification on that because you said that the town common principal, the 30,000 that's listed in this total of 217,597 was coming from free cash, not being raised and appropriated.
Do you get a do-over? You've made 6 mistakes.
I made something.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, sir, Mr. Carter.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town raise and appropriate the following sums of money to pay for debt expenses. $7,500 for short-term interest. $1,320 for town common interest. Fire department debt on the truck. Highway department truck debt, $49,541. That's fire debt. Highway department debt on the garage, $80,790. The fire debt, the truck for the fire department is $48,446. And to raise and appropriate $30,000, to transfer from free cash $30,000 for town common principal. So we'll raise and appropriate $187,597 and transfer from free cash $30,000
For a
total of $217,597.
Is there a second?
Second.
I am sick of people making mistakes. All right, you too, Mr. Driver, get a do-over. Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
Which changes everything. Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Okay, any discussion? Yes.
Judy Howard, Street Corner. I just have a question as to what remains of the town common principal.
The town common was purchased something different than what we would normally do. We incurred the debt, but we never did a debt exclusion for it. So that has been coming out of our regular tax revenue for the last 8 years. It was set up for 10 payments of $15,000 plus the interest. This $30,000 takes care of year 9 and 10. We're done with it. So we're able to take it from free cash, so it doesn't infringe on our levy limit, and it also frees up that levy limit for next year also. So get it out of the way.
Good questions, Andrew. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Very good. We'll go question about the debt on the garage. How many more years do we have to pay on that?
It's a long time. It's either 2045 or 2048.
Way beyond that.
Very.
Mr. Moderator, the terms of that debt show that we have 38 years to go. It's at 4.125% interest. We have made an inquiry as to whether we could possibly finance that at a lower rate, and to date, we've got no encouragement from any banks willing to touch that.
Good question, good answer. Operator error, again. Any further discussion about Article 24? Ready to vote? Okay, all of those in favor of Article 24, as read, for a total of $217,597 for debt expenses, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Well done. Okay, Article 25, do I hear a motion? Mrs. Lugard.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town authorize the following revolving fund accounts pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 53E&a, to account for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2013. I'll read them across because in the far right-hand column, it says FY 2013 spending limit. That should read FY 2014 spending limit. Dog license and control, that spending limit set at $2,500. Park set at $1,500, and library set at $2,500.
Let's see, is there a second?
Second.
I would just like to say one thing right here. The posted article in the warrant called for 2,000. In essence, a scrivener's error. So once again, we come down to a moderator's discretion on whether or not something exceeds the scope. My policy has been, I've left it to the meeting, it should have been $2,500 to begin with. Instead, it was written as $2,000. The motion by Mrs. Lugard and seconded is for $2,500. So is there anyone who objects to exceeding the limit by $500 on the revolving fund? I think the consequence of that would be to come back at a special town meeting and up it. Is that right? Properly posted and up it would be the consequence of that. Any objection to exceeding it by $500? Hearing none, good motion. Did you speak to this article at all?
I didn't have anything further to add unless somebody has any questions.
Okay, fine. Is there a recommendation from the FinCom?
Recommendation from the Finance Committee is unanimous for.
Unanimous for. Thank you. Discussion. Ready to vote? Okay, all of those in favor of the revolving funds, in Article 25, again, dog license and control 2,500, park 1,500, library 2,500. Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 26, do I hear a motion?
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Colvin.
I moved that the town transfer from free cash $200,000 to the stabilization account.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Finance Committee, is there a recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, this is good and wise, and we recommend it unanimously and with considerable enthusiasm.
Thank you. Wow. Any comments or questions? Ready to vote?
You never look at the table.
Who needs the table?
Well, just as a little background on this account, we're currently at 216,713. We're adding another 200,000. It would bring us to $416,713 in that account. It's a good thing. It takes 2/3 vote to get it out. It's a good account. It combined that with free cash, and we're over 10% of our budget here, and I feel really good about that also. And so does the board.
Thank you. That wasn't a comment. Sorry I interrupted you.
emphasize the virtue of being able to do this, we think, is that if you look at the last page of that handout that had to do with the debt, you'll see that potentially we could incur this coming fiscal year a $196,151 repayment of the debt that we have taken out to account for the expenses we've had to absorb until such time as we either get partial or full reimbursement from FEMA and MEMA. It's our belief that we'll get that, at least in part. We may get all of it reimbursed, which would be wonderful news. But in the event we do not, this $200,000 going into the stabilization fund is a hedge against that possible that liability that we currently carry and may need to be in some fashion. Now that debt need not necessarily get paid all in this coming year because we're allowed to roll it over for as much as 10 different years. But until such time as we get reimbursed, we would probably roll it over at a very modest interest cost until such time as we can determine whether or not we're going to get fully or at least partially reimbursed.
Thank you. Any other comments and questions? Ready to vote? All those in favor of transferring from free cash $200,000 to stabilization, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Carries unanimously. Article 27.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Carter.
you're not going to catch me on this one. I move that the town authorize the select board to accept and extend any grants and/or gifts that may become available.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a recommendation from Finance Committee?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends unanimously support of this article.
What about the enthusiastically part?
Very enthusiastically, they offer a lot of gifts.
Discussion. Ready to vote? All in favor of authorizing the select board to accept and expend any grants and/or gifts that may become available, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries unanimously. Thank you. And Article 28, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. Last but not least, I think we're at the end of these here. Article 28, I move the town authorize the select board to dispose of any unused town-owned equipment and/or property.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
We are very excited to recommend this unanimously.
You people are easy. Any discussion? Yes. Yes.
What vehicles that you know of this year are going to dispose?
At this moment in time, the select board did discuss that we would send around a note of the different departments and inquire what they had that needed to be put on a list so that we could do whatever it is that needs to be sold, liquidated, all at one time together.
Other discussion? Questions, comments? Are we ready to vote? All in favor of authorizing the select board to dispose of any unused town-owned equipment on our property, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? As I look around, I see so many people who give so much to this town, who have given and continue to give. And I'm so appreciative of what it takes to get us to this point today. Extraordinary. And my thanks to each of you at this table, my thanks to each of you in the audience. You're stalwart for still being here at 4:15, and you're furious because I'm holding you here even longer. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? I move to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you.